From Anshei Sphard-Beth Emeth congregation, it's time to take 10 minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Pesach, the four freedoms. Certainly freedom is a major theme of the Haggadah, not just a modern lingo, but it says, L'shana haba b'nei chorim, we're looking forward to a day when next year we'll be free in Jerusalem. We also say, Hotzianu mi'avdut l'cherut. We say toward the end of the Haggadah, before the matzah is eaten, we say that God took us from avdut l'cherut, from slavery to freedom. But the question is, freedom from what? Freedom for what? Freedom to what? What kind of freedom are we talking about? What specific freedoms? So we've mentioned in the past, in our discussion of the four Haggadot and the special Haggadah we put together, that there are actually four stories in the Haggadah that are told. And of course, this is part of the four cups, the four sons, the four questions. So many fours, four languages of redemption. And indeed, in the Haggadah, four stories. Story number one, Avadim ayinu l'Farao Mitzrayim, Etzinu Hashem Elokeinu misham b'yad chazaka v'zoron tuyah. We were slaves for Pharaoh in Egypt, and God, our Lord our God, took us out of Egypt with a strong hand and a mighty arm. Now, what freedom is that? Freedom, we were slaves, he took us out. Freedom of movement. The worst thing about a slave is that a slave is stuck. He can't run away, he can't go away, he can't go anywhere. He is stuck where he is. If he runs away, it's a most egregious crime. What we want is freedom of movement. First of all, we had freedom of movement. Number two, second story told in the Haggadah is Mitchila Avdei Avodah Zarah Hayu Avotenu. Another opinion in the Talmud is that we should tell the story like this: that first we worshipped idols. Now we came close to worship God, whether through the bringing of the Paschal Lamb, whether through coming to Mount Sinai, whether we got closer to God, whether to this day, right now, we are now holy and closer to God, hopefully, than we were when we went out of Egypt. We're hopefully closer than we were in the days of Terach or in the days of Avraham when they worshipped idols. So what freedom is this? Clearly, this is freedom of worship, that we're free to worship our God. When you're a slave, you very often feel like, the God of the master seems like it does pretty well for them. Maybe I should worship that God. So you become influenced by the successful God of the oppressor. So freedom of worship means I'm going to worship whom I want to. I'm not going to worship because of the success of the oppressor. Number three, there's a story. It's not told in the Talmud that you have to tell this story, but we have it in the Haggadah. It says that Avraham was told during the covenant of the parts, Avraham was told that that we would be slaves, strangers in our land for 400 years, and then for 400 years we'll be slaves, and then strangers, then we go out with great wealth. That's how the Haggadah tells that story. There's other verses there not mentioned, but that's how the Haggadah tells the story, that we went out with great wealth. What freedom is that? It's going to be hard to imagine. Freedom of wealth? What is this? So if you think about it, what did they have in communist Russia? They had freedom. Some, not much freedom of movement, but a little bit. They went to work, they support their families. What they didn't have was freedom to accumulate wealth. Our goal in life is not necessarily to be wealthy, but we want the ability to be wealthy if we want to. One son wants to be a millionaire, one son wants to be a doctor, one son wants to be a teacher, a more modest profession. That doesn't matter what it is, but you want to have the freedom to accumulate wealth if you're able to accomplish that, and that's a freedom as well. And what is wealth? Wealth is dignity. Wealth can be associated with dignity, the ability to develop status and dignity and to develop your stature in the community. You should be, according to your ability to do so, you should be able to do that. A slave is just a slave. As a slave is a slave. His status remains very lowly. Freedom to achieve, freedom to accumulate wealth, to achieve a certain status. Finally, the third opinion is actually the one mentioned in the Mishnah. That we interpret the whole section of the Aramean who oppressed our forefather, that we interpret it to be Lavan tried to kill our forefather Jacob, until we went down to Egypt, and finally we get out of Egypt with God's great help. So what is that? Well, Lavan was the great oppressor. He oppressed Yaakov as an employer. He oppressed Yaakov. He tried to kill him, persecute him. And then of course the Egyptians did the same. We compare Pharaoh and Laban. We think about all the various oppressors that have oppressed us through the generations. So what we're asking for, what we're celebrating, is freedom of oppression, freedom from oppression. So we have then 4 freedoms: freedom of movement, freedom of worship, freedom to accumulate wealth, dignity, status, and stature, and freedom from oppression. But these are not the only freedoms that Chag Pesach, the holiday of Passover, suggest. When we talk about Yetziat Mitzrayim, going out of Egypt, there's something else as well, and that's the freedom from the Gashmius, freedom from the physicality. Suddenly we're eating matzah. It's not the most luxurious bread, but we eat it anyway because we become enslaved to excesses. And one of the ideas of Pesach is to be more modest and humble. Perhaps the extravagant food we prepare on Pesach, although it's in spirit with the simcha, the joy of Yom, perhaps it's not completely in the spirit with the humility of the matzah. Humility, matzah is flat, the bread rises high, reminds us to have the freedom to be yourself and to be more humble and not puff ourselves up. And the freedom to stop worshiping ourselves. One of the ideas of getting out of Egypt is to be free from worshiping ourselves. What's an idol? You take something, you make it, and you say, oh, this is great. I worship this. We do it all the time. We say, oh, didn't I do a great job on that? Wasn't that the greatest? Because you did it. The freedom to free ourselves from worshiping ourselves. So we have the 4 freedoms: freedom of movement, freedom of worship, freedom to accumulate wealth and dignity, freedom from oppression. Some are freedoms from, as oppression, some are freedoms to move, to worship, to accumulate wealth. And finally, Yetziat Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt, frees us up to be able to be ourselves, not to get overly ensconced in the world of physicality, which obscures our view of ourselves, not to be free from my haughty self, and to be free from self-worship. And if we can do that, and we can truly say that we are Kilu Hu Yatzam Mitzrayim, as if we went out of Egypt as well, we should appreciate the freedoms we have: freedom of movement, freedom of worship, freedom to accumulate wealth, freedom from oppression, which we're blessed with in this generation. But we should also use the opportunity to free ourselves from haughtiness, from self-worship, self-aggrandizement, and from overly focusing on the physical, to free ourselves to focus on the spiritual as well. Thank you for joining us here at the Anshei Sphard-Beth Emeth congregation for our discussion of Pesach. Join us each week for the discussion of the holidays, Parsha, how-to videos as well. And thanks to Jason Lefkowitz, our producer. Thank you.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit asb.org.